Hello everyone. Well, Tszyu versus Keith Thurman is now officially off because apparently Thurman has some kind of injury that's forced him to pull out of his fight scheduled for March 30th. Tszyu is now fighting the 6'6" left-handed Sebastian FUNDORA on March 30th. And Tszyu versus FUNDORA will be for not only Tim's WBO super welterweight belt, but also the WBC vacant super welterweight belt. So now it is a 12-round title fight with two belts on the line. So I already broke down Tszyu as a fighter overall, and I will put a link to that video here. I'm not going to duplicate that, but I will bookmark that video so you can jump straight to my analysis of Tszyu as a fighter. Let's take a look at Sebastian FUNDORA. Well, right off the top, he's, as I said, a 6'6" southpaw that fights at 154. So he's a real anomaly as a fighter, period. Let's look at three things that I think FUNDORA does really well. The first thing is that it's kind of surprising for a super tall, lanky fighter, but FUNDORA just loves to fight on the inside, and he's effective at it, surprisingly enough. FUNDORA is able to stand toe-to-toe with his opponents. He loves to fire these super tight inside uppercuts. He keeps his elbows nice and tight to his body defensively, and then he also throws nice tight hooks to the head, and he weaves under his opponent's counter punches while he's standing toe-to-toe. So that is a real asset because it is such an unusual sort of fight preference for somebody of that build. Now the second thing that I think FUNDORA does well, and it's also not completely surprising but a little bit surprising, is that he's very well coordinated and his footwork is decent, again, especially for somebody of that sort of super extra tall, lanky physique. Oftentimes you'll see fighters with that type of physique a little bit awkward and at times a little bit off balance and not able to kind of maneuver smoothly in the ring. But I think Sebastian has decent enough footwork. He's certainly not crossing his feet, which, as you know, is one of my absolute pet peeves for any type of fighter to do. Third thing that Sebastian does decently is he does put together his jab right hand, right hook. Jab left hand, straight left, right hook. He puts those punches together smoothly when he's on the outside. Now, on the other hand, there's a couple of concerns I have about Sebastian, and one of them is that while he puts those punches together smoothly on the outside, I don't know that he's figured out how to sit down on his punches when he's firing from the outside, because they have enough snap and enough smoothness to them, but I don't know that they have as much power on them as they could, especially given that he's got that long, lean build. And it's when you're gifted with that physique, it's the physics is on your side to be able to generate power from that outside distance, and it's a super advantage, of course, because your shorter opponent doesn't have the arm reach to reach you from that point. So advantage is all in your favor if you can execute. Second thing that I kind of question about Sebastian is he's okay on the outside. He's not great on the outside. He's okay on the outside, and he loves to fight on the inside. But it's that middle distance where he seems to want to avoid altogether. And that, in fact, was where he made an error in his last fight versus Brian Mendoza and wound up getting caught. That was because he fired this reverse or rear punch uppercut from a little bit too far out. And in doing so, I believe Mendoza could tell it was coming and fired the counter punch, which rocked Fundora and kind of was the beginning of the end. Of course, he followed up with additional punches and finally wound up flooring Fundora for good and earning the KO victory. But now here's the interesting thing with that left uppercut from Fundora. Typically, that's really a bread and butter punch for someone who is so tall. The uppercut, especially the rear uppercut, whether you're a righty or a lefty. And the reason for that is, it seems odd, but it can be a bread and butter punch for someone who's so tall because it's almost like it's their straight rear punch, a straight reverse punch. Because they're firing at your head, but they're so much taller than you that punch is coming out straight. Whereas if they turned it over and they were trying to fire a straight right or a straight left from a much higher height, they would be punching down, and that punch would be less effective. It'll also kind of leave them open for a hook on either side of their head. So for a super extra tall person, firing a reverse uppercut almost serves like what for the rest of us would be a straight right or a straight left, depending on our stance. So I feel that like people who have that extra tall, extra lanky build, just find that reverse uppercut as a bread and butter punch, kind of just naturally, even if nobody teaches it to them, because it's they have such a rare build, it's not really part of most fighters' repertoire. But as I said, the danger with firing the uppercut is that any uppercut for any fighter, the danger of throwing the uppercut is that you do leave yourself open. So you need to learn how to fire it from the right distance, number one. And for those of us who don't necessarily have the height advantage, you've got to kind of hide your chin in the crook of your shoulder that's throwing the uppercut, and you have to be sure that you're going to come back with the opposite hand, either as a right uppercut left hook or a left uppercut overhand right. You have to be prepared to fire that reciprocal punch right away, because the purpose of throwing the uppercut was to knock your opponent's chin up in the air, and then you're going to come back down with a smashing right or a smashing left hook, right? You pop their chin on up to expose it to the next punch that's going to take them out. But in any case, Fundora, it seems, has difficulty with that middle distance. And I don't know if that's why he fell in love with fighting on the inside, because he's just like, to heck with his middle distance. It's a little too problematic for me because my arms are so long and it's awkward for me. So, but if I get all the way inside, then I feel comfortable. In any case, I think that's an area he needs to work on, and he does need to be very aware of when he throws that left uppercut, that he's at the correct distance so he doesn't leave himself open for a counter. Now, with all that said about Tszyu in the previous video and Fundora in this video, let's take a look at how Tszyu and Sebastian FUNDORA match up for this fight. Now, right off the top, I will say that in terms of preparation, Fundora definitely has the advantage. And that's because he was prepping for a fight on the same card anyways. Sebastian FUNDORA was already signed to fight Serhei Bohacek for the interim, the vacant, WBC super welterweight belt. These guys were already on the card March 30th at T-Mobile Arena on the undercard of Tszyu versus Keith Thurman, which ironically was not going to be for a title. So he's already in the thick of things with camp. He's just winding down, and on top of that, because he was prepping for Serhei Bohacek, he should be well prepared for Tszyu. That's because I think I would categorize Serhei Bohacek also as a right-handed power puncher. Tszyu is a right-handed power puncher, so there'll be a little bit of fine-tuning in terms of game plan for Sebastian FUNDORA and his camp, but there's not really much adjustment they need to be concerned about, provided they've been putting in the work in this camp for Bohacek. Now, Tszyu, on the other hand, was going to fight a right-handed boxer-puncher in Keith Thurman, and now he's faced with a very odd, super tall, left-handed fighter who loves to bang around on the inside. So there's definitely a difference for him between FUNDORA and Bohacek. Not only the right-handed, left-handed, but just the overall style. Now, is that going to throw Tszyu off? Well, in a sense, he might be fine because he's a right-handed power puncher or pressure fighter, and that's kind of what he needs to do to get to FUNDORA. He certainly can't stay out on the outside. That's not his thing anyways. He can't stay out on the outside and box somebody that much taller anyhow, and that's not Tszyu's sort of bent. So here's what I feel he'll need to do is he'll need to just utilize really good footwork, a lot of head movement, and use that pressure to get inside FUNDORA. And now, even though FUNDORA likes to fight on the inside, I think if Tim can keep his elbows in super tight and find the center line on FUNDORA, he might be able to really land some effective shots on FUNDORA. And Tim can actually use his shorter stance to his advantage because the body will be right there for him. So if he can fire a body shot right to the center line on FUNDORA, and then go straight up the center line to fire an uppercut right to the underside of FUNDORA's chin, I think that can be a super effective combination on either side. So the body shot would be one where you just go straight in with his fist right to FUNDORA's stomach center line, and then just scrape right up his chest to the underside of his chin, and then come across with the hard power shot from his opposite side. So, left body shot, left uppercut, overhand right, or right body shot, right uppercut, left hook. But yeah, I think Tim is definitely capable of that. It's just a question of him finding a way to execute that. Now, I think what some of FUNDORA's previous opponents did that was not effective was just trying to bang to the outside of FUNDORA's body, but FUNDORA keeps his elbows in pretty tight, so he protects his body quite well. So that's why I'm advocating that Tszyu try to find that center line and work FUNDORA's body head that way. On the other hand, if FUNDORA can pick his moments to work inside, in other words, just stay on the outside. He should be able to stay on the outside when he chooses to, and just kind of throw the jab right hand to keep Tim away from him, and then just fall inside when he wants to fight inside, and then start peppering Tim up with his little short uppercuts and hooks to the head. Fundora could do well for himself. He doesn't seem to really load up and look for a huge knockout punch on the inside. He just seems to be happy to just continually pepper up his opponents on the inside. Take for example his fight with Erickson Lubin, where I think it was Mora, the referee, stopped that fight just based on the fact that Erickson Lubin just was getting way too banged up and had, this crazy hematoma here right between his eyebrows, and then his cheeks were starting to get swollen as well. On a side note, it's always important to invest in a good cut man and be happy to pay him that 2%, because what a good cut man can do is to prevent swelling from occurring in the first place, and then hopefully if it does happen, they can take care of it, but that ends well. Now, as the sort of overall disclaimer to whether or not Tszyu going to be prepped for Sebastian FUNDORA, here's the thing. I'm super suspicious of this sort of fight falling off like 11 days out, and now lo and behold, the main event is now for not one but 2 belts, the WBO and the WBC. And okay, so let's take a general look at how TGB, the promoter, protects themselves. It's very parallel to a practice that the UFC has taken up in the past few years, which is, okay, in the UFC what they do is they say they're going to keep some guy like on ice, right, for a big title fight. Like the UFC will pay a third fighter in that same weight division and say, hey, you're gonna make weight, go through your camp, you're gonna make weight, and we'll pay you. And then, if one of the 2 guys or girls in the main event falls off at the last moment between the weigh-in and getting to the cage, then you are the person that's gonna save the day and jump in the cage for this main event. So so the UFC has made a practice of keeping a third fighter on ice, so to speak, for their big events, so they don't have to scratch the whole affair. PBC and TGB Promotions has followed a similar tactic for the last few years, which they don't pay to keep somebody on ice, but what they'll do is they will schedule a fight in the same weight division further down on the undercard. That way, if one of the 2, as I say, principals in the main event falls out, they have a backup. They'll just yank one of the fighters from that undercard fight, elevate that person up to the main event, and the other fighter, unfortunately, I don't know if he gets compensated. I imagine it depends on how good of a manager that person has. But I've seen that play out more than a few times, and if you take a look, if you care to take a look at previous TGB/PBC cards, you'll notice that there's always a fight on the undercard that happens to be at the same weight division as the main event. So the real question is, how much advance notice was Tszyu and Sebastian FUNDORA given? Maybe they told Sebastian right off the bat, hey, you know what? If the main event falls out, you're gonna step in. Now here's something that's I'm even a little bit more suspicious than that. I'm not sure what the motivation for doing this was, but it was super odd to have the main event be a 12-round fight for not a non-title affair. That's just strange in the boxing world to begin with, because if it's going to be a non-title affair, it's typically 10 rounds instead of 12. The second thing, which I think is maybe even more of a factor, is this is the first card. This is the first time that PBC/TGB Promotions is going to air on Amazon Prime. And typically, the network always wants the main event to be for a world championship. That just makes it easier for them to sell to the general public and, of course, to a live audience. You know, you got to build some hype. And if you say, hey, it's a world championship, you know, hopefully you can get more people to tune in. But, you know, saying, well, the world champion is fighting, but it's not going to be for the belt. The belt's not on the line. That was Tszyu's case. He holds the WBO super welter belt, but it was not going to be on the line versus Keith Thurman. So, I mean, that's not really a great selling point. So, I'm just one of those people that's kind of suspicious when I see things like this go down, because it's like now 11 days out you actually have the fight you wanted to have. Why was this fight not made in the first place? Is it because Fundora's coming off a loss and just got KO'd by Brian Mendoza, whom Tszyu beat to get the belt? You know, I don't know. I'm not really, obviously I'm not privy to the behind the scenes machinations, but I'm a little suspicious about how this whole thing played out. And, you know, it's like, oh wow, look, you know, something unfortunate happened, but then we got what we wanted in the end anyways. You know, Keith Thurman is a good hype man. He's good on camera. He throws out those sound bites that will get people tuned in. So, you know, maybe his promoter just decided he would be a good guy to kind of promote the fight and get people anticipating this fight or interested in the fight, and then they'll pull the last second switcheroo because, you know, Tim, God bless him, and Sebastian FUNDORA aren't really great. They are. Tim's fine on camera, but he's not sort of a hype type guy. And FUNDORA, I don't know anything about him. I really haven't seen him do much in terms of interviews or whatnot. So he's not going to be a great salesman. So maybe they let Thurman be the salesman for the March 30th card, and maybe they're going to take care of him and say, hey buddy, you know, sorry, you're gonna have an injury and pull out of the fight, but we'll take care of you. I don't know, that's just my suspicion. But in any case, the bigger question is really how well is Tszyu going to be able to deal with this super lanky southpaw? That's the big question. I'm hoping that Tim is able to make the necessary adjustments. Think he's a hard worker and has a good strong pressure style of fighting, and is actually a much better boxer perhaps, and has more skills at his disposal than he's shown us in his recent fights. So I'm actually looking more forward to this fight than against Keith Thurman, even though I thought that was going to be a good fight. But I think the intrigue factor is definitely there with Sebastian FUNDORA. What do you guys think? Who do you think has the advantage in this fight? Tszyu versus Sebastian FUNDORA. Who do you think wins? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for listening.